Welcome in, everybody, to Inside the AAC. Robbie Listella here for the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. We talked a lot of AAC on the Listella Report on Tuesday night, so we figured, why don't we bring you guys a separate show where you guys can go in before the weekend and before the Thursday night occasional AAC matchup and get a feel for what's going on in the American. So last week's sixth slate, it was kind of the kickoff of conference play with a couple games in week five. Also, being full of conference play, but week six was where conference play really got going. Last week's slate had three big blowouts: Navy over Air Force, Army over Tulsa, and Tulane over UAB. And Tulane over UAB was honestly the only blowout to me that really was showing of the other team. Air Force has had some struggles, and Army's just been amazing no matter who they really play. But UAB getting a 71-point spot put on them last week against Tulane was just really surprising to me. I knew there was some struggles going on with Trent Dilfer and the comments that he made last week. We talked about that. But really what was most surprising last week was just the defense really collapsing for UAB. That there was just no answer for Tulane. The second half, they were just out completely. UAB had something going with Lee Beebe there in that early part of the game. He finished averaging 8.7 yards per carry. But when you're going down, I think they started the game. I think they were down 28-0. No, they were down 30-6 at one point. They were down 27-6 was the worst it got. 20-0 or 20-3 was the worst it got for UAB at one point there before it really brakes fell off there in the second half. But UAB, they're in a bit of a pickle going into the week 7 slate. But last week also Temple sticking with UConn, which that one was surprising to me. UConn's been beating the heck out of everybody, and then all of a sudden Temple finds a way to run the ball. I think they had less than 30 yards the previous week rushing, and they're able to rush the ball against UConn, stay in that game. They rushed for 136 on the ground. Therese Worthy had a pretty solid day, averaged close to 8 yards a carry, 95 yards on the ground. So, I think that with UConn winning that game, that's a bit of a sour note for Temple, but overall it's still progress, right? I mean, Temple is 1-5 on the season. They were in it with a UConn team that's really been competing with anybody. So, I think that's progress for Temple. But going forward, they got to try to find a way to squeak that one out. And then the big one last week, the blowout that I didn't mention yet, Charlotte over ECU, 55-24, the battle of the Carolinas. Charlotte, they had some struggles early there in the season, but they came out in that game. Deshaun Purdy looked good. Biff Poggi addressed some comments from the defensive coordinator, Ryan Osborne, earlier in the week. And those were addressed, and the defense resounded. They shut down Jake Garcia. They forced them to have to go to Caton Hauser at one point, and that game was over early. ECU really went into Charlotte, and they didn't play. I mean, I don't know, Mike Houston's been struggling for a while now at East Carolina, and there's been, they tried to address, with the portal. They've tried to bring in local talent. It's just not been working out for Mike Houston. It's just not. They're 3-3 on the season, so only need 3 more wins to get a bowl game if you're ECU. But looking at that schedule, they got to play. They're on bye this week, and then they go play Army next week. That's not looking good. Army's probably going to roll over UAB this week, and so I just don't see them winning that game. And then they go play Temple. So that's going to be a battle because, right, Temple just went in there and found a way to get the rushing game going against a UConn team, which has been pretty solid against the run this year. So if Temple's coming into that one becomes a battle. And then they play FAU at home. So that 2 game stretch right there is really what you're going to get to know about this ECU team and whether or not they're getting to a bowl or not. Which, coming into the season, ECU was looking to rebound last year, was a bit of a struggle, had a very difficult schedule, and they get 3 wins early on. They beat Norfolk State, they beat Old Dominion. Both those games, obviously, they should have won. But then they lose 2 bad ones. They lose to App State and they lose to Liberty. And if ECU fans looking at that schedule, they thought they could have been 4-0 heading into that matchup with UTSA. Now, they go into that matchup with UTSA and they win, but that's been their biggest win really so far this season. It's with East Carolina, they have to find a way to run the ball. Rajee Harris is going to be this team's key to success. Now, whether or not that's going to be enough, I don't know. Their quarterback play has probably been the big down spot so far for this team. They bring in Jake Garcia this offseason, former Miami guy, and he's supposed to be the answer. He's not. Now they got to go to Caton Hauser, who had some struggles in his previous stop at I believe Michigan State, and now he's kind of maybe be thrust in that starting role. I don't know if they give up on Jake Garcia yet, but we'll see. It's more than manageable for East Carolina to get to a bowl. That easy part of the early season for them, they come out of that with 3 wins. So now they just got to find a way to get 3 wins out of Temple, FAU, Tulsa, North Texas, and Navy. They got to play Navy and Army. So really they got to win 3 out of 4 between Temple, FAU, Tulsa, and North Texas. Whether they have that in them, I don't know. If they don't, they're going to have to beat either Army or Navy, which is going to be tough. Army and Navy they've came into the AAC and shown why they deserve to be here. So we shall see what unfolds with East Carolina. They're on bye this week, as we mentioned, but they need 3 wins to kind of get to that bowl game eligibility. But with Charlotte's now also at 3-3, and they lose to James Madison 37 in that first game of the year, and then all of a sudden everyone's kind of like, and then they compete with North Carolina. A lot of people wrote that game off as a bad one for Charlotte. I saw Deshaun Purdy go in there and give them a shot. I mean, they were losing. Then the backup, then Max Brown gets hurt, and then you bring in Deshaun Purdy, and you're thinking, oh man, North Carolina's going to blow the brakes off. Now, I don't know how good UNC is this year. Mac Brown and co seem to be struggling a little bit over there, but they kept that one close. The real bad one was they only get a 1-point win over Gardner-Webb. That's when the fan base early on was like, oh yeah, the wheels are falling off. But Gardner-Webb's a good team for the FCS, right? And that was the Charlotte team that had just found out they're going to have to start freshman quarterback. Freshman quarterback struggles, gets hurt. Then they have to bring in Trexler Ivy, who he's their third string, right? And he leads them to victory. And Biff Poggi kind of shrugged him off this offseason. He had some success last year, had some struggles, wasn't perfect. But he got the job done last year. And so he comes in, he wins them that game, struggles against Indiana. Right, that's Indiana. I mean, it's not, they weren't going in there expecting that to win that one, especially with the way Indiana's been playing this year. But, I think with Charlotte, then they found some success against Rice, right? I mean, Trexler Ivy was struggling in that one. Then they bring in Deshaun Purdy back in against Rice, and he gets the job done. Rice had a chance at winning that game. They missed a field goal, but Deshaun Purdy only missed five passes. He was 10 of 15 for 183, 2 scores. So, I'm ready to say Charlotte's a contender. I'm not going to say for the conference, but definitely for a bowl game. I mean, there is no reason, looking at Charlotte's schedule, why Charlotte's not making a bowl game here. They got 3 wins now. They've got a couple tough matchups on the slate. They got to play Navy, Memphis, and USF, and also Tulane. So out of those ones, they've got to find a way to win 2 of them. If Charlotte's really going to contend for a bowl game and prove, progress is being made and that this is a team that's, competing, because in the early part of the season there were questions. But if they can beat Navy, beat a USF team, which potentially wheels may fall off, by that November 16th matchup if Byron Brown's unable to return. So I'm thinking with with that schedule, there's a way for them to get 2 wins, and then they just have to get one more win out of either FAU or UAB, which it's possible. It's possible. I see a path to 6-6. If they finish better than 6-6, that means that Charlotte is really making progress because this schedule is tough down the stretch. I mean, FAU is not going to be a pushover. We'll see. We'll see what happens against North Texas this week. That will kind of show if they're going to be a pushover or not. But we'll see for Charlotte. I like what I've seen so far out of Deshaun Purdy. I want to keep seeing him improving, and Max Brown potentially may come back as well. And if Max Brown is healthy leading this program, then there's a chance that Charlotte most definitely is contending for a bowl game in year 2 of the Biff Poggi era. And I. I liked Biff coming in. A lot of people gave that move a hard time. No head coaching experience, but he's a people person, and this is the people business. We hear Tom Herman talking about that in the press conference yesterday. He's in the right business to be kind of a people oriented person. He may not have that D1 coaching experience as a head coach, but he was at Michigan. He saw what goes in to everything that made that program successful, and some of the stuff off the field that led to some issues. So, he's seen it all. He's been at the high school level, which influences him sometimes for the better or the worse. But what you get at the high school level is you have to care. You have to care. And you have to care about those guys who you're coaching. And that transcends even into the college level. Because, yes, it's slowly becoming a little bit more like the pros. But these guys, they're still younger. They're still in need of molding and turning these people into good men to mold them into what college is really for. And part of that is still valid in college athletics. And Biff Poggi is a leader. He's somebody who can give good influence on these kids and help them out, and he really cares. Which when they were struggling, and then there's social media rifts with the assistant coaches, I'm like, uh-oh. But, they found a way to really, winning back-to-back AAC games is something that is showing that this team is making progress. Now, it's first Rice and ECU, who they may not be the top teams in the conference this year. So they've got to prove it. Charlotte will have to prove it. They've got tough matchups coming with Navy, Memphis, and Tulane back-to-back, and then also USF. So make that 4 straight tough games in a row. But if they get out of that with 2 wins, it's bowling year in Charlotte. So we'll see kind of what unfolds in Charlotte if Max Brown makes his triumphant return. But big win last week over ECU. That's a regional rivalry. That's a FAU over USF. That's any of the Texas schools. That's Memphis beating up on Tennessee in basketball or Ole Miss. So that's a big win for Biff Poggi and his staff. But kind of taking a look at this Week 7 slate a little bit, closing out on Charlotte. They are on bye this week. They get to celebrate that win over ECU even a little bit more. But we've got 4 games this week. We've got 4 AAC teams on bye, but 4 matching up this week. We've got starting off with FAU versus North Texas. Line right now -6.5. Originally opened at -8, down now underneath a touchdown. FAU coming in at 2-3. North Texas at 4-1. But FAU, they found a little bit of success last week versus Wagner, right? They had the rushing game going. They found a way with Case and Wiseman to have their deepest depth of target of the season, which that's important. FAU could not pass the ball in the first couple of games, and Case came in, gave them a jolt. Cam has been dealing with Cam Fancher, the starting quarterback for FAU. He's been dealing with a bit of a thumb injury, so that kind of impacted his ability. They found success last week. Cam is healthy this week, so he's going to be the starting quarterback against a North Texas team who they're going to need that offense. They are going to need FAU is going to need to match that North Texas offense, so Cam's going to need to be healthy because Chandler Morris is coming in there with North Texas. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to see if there's been an injury update on Damon Ward before I speak. It looks like he's a game time decision still. So Damon Ward, Chandler Morris, and DT Sheffield. That's a trio right there that FAU is going to have to compete. We'll see if Damon Ward is active this week, but if he is, that's two top receivers going up against FAU's stout DB group, Bugs Brown and Day Hill. So, I think it's going to be kind of, moving force versus unstoppable object kind of vibes here. I mean, FAU's pass defense has been, the strength of the team, but they haven't really been tested too much. They were kind of tested against UConn, but UConn leaned heavy into that run game and and then against Michigan State, but that was the first game of the season. So don't really know how much FAU's DB unit has been tested, but for what it's worth, they've been solid. One of the top 10 defenses as a whole in the country, but specifically pass defense has been really strong. But they're facing off a team. Chandler Morris is a gunslinger, son of Chad Morris, Arkansas coach. He's going to come in there and sling this thing. I mean, he's got 16 touchdowns on the year, but also 6 picks. So he's got a little bit of turnover side to him, but he can also air it out a little bit. So we'll see if Chandler if the FAU defense, is able to kind of force any turnovers on him. But they're definitely going to try to air it out. The run game is, Damasha Harris is 22 carries for 193 yards and a score on the year. He's averaged over 8 yards a carry, close to 9 on the year. But, this is a team that's going to come in there and pass it. And FAU's defense, for what it's worth, has been solid against the pass. Had their struggles against the run. But this game this week, it's going to come down to whether the FAU offense has actually found its stride. You want to say that it has. They found success last week against Wagner. The offense looked as good as it does, but that's an FCS school. They really haven't been able to show, especially the passing side of things. Even against FIU, there were some struggles there. So this is the game where if Cam Fancher's healthy, there's been a bye week. Herman's involved in the offense. There's 4 out of the top 6 starting wide receivers are out injured, but there's nothing you can do about that. So with FAU this week, it's going to be important for them to find that offensive rhythm early, be able to match North Texas, because FAU's DB room may be talented, but to shut North Texas down entirely is impossible. They're going to find a way to score. They're going to find a way to put points up, especially early. UNT's been a pretty solid offense early in games, so we'll see if FAU can match. If they can't, I would take UNT minus 6.5. But if FAU finds that rhythm early, this game could be a shootout, and FAU's on the home field, so they can find a way to win this game. But it's not going to be easy. If the offense is asleep at the wheel, North Texas will come out there and blow the brakes off of them at home, sending FAU to 2-4, moving North Texas within one game of a bowl eligibility. It's almost a must win for FAU. It's either this game's a must win or UTSA is a must win. If they don't win either of those games, bowl eligibility starts to slowly float out the window. So we'll see if they can pull one of these next 2 games off, keep the season not the best it could have been, but there's been injuries and everything that goes into a tough season to start. So we'll see if FAU can turn around. Minus 6.5 for UNT could be safe, but if FAU finds their rhythm, could be dangerous. So I don't know about that game. I would ear away from it. There's value there, yes, and if you want to bank on the fact that FAU may not come out early, I hear you. It's not the worst. It's not the most illogical bet, but there's a chance FAU's offense has rebounded and they're competing with North Texas. So we'll see. But moving on, UAB versus Army. Army comes in at 26-point favorites. Oh my. UAB at 1-4, Army at 5-0, and Army's just been rolling over teams this year. I mean, they haven't even allowed 50 points on the season. Next closest in the conference is Memphis, who's allowed 92 on the year, but every other team's allowed over 100 points on the year. Army hasn't even allowed 50 yet. So UAB has work to do off a week where they were just blown out, obliterated by Tulane. Minus 26 is a lot of points, though. I don't know even with how bad UAB has been, Army's going to try to run the ball. They're going to try to limit possessions. They're going to just try to run it down their throat. And yes, I mean, if UAB is doing absolutely nothing, they can score 28 points and beat them, and that's that. But UAB, Trent Dilfer, this group, they have to be fighting for something. They have to be. If they're not fighting, I don't know what they're doing. They got to find a way to fight. They got to find a way to keep this game within the 26-point spread. I don't bet on anything that's that big of a spread, personally. If you want to take Army minus 26, Godspeed. You'll be rooting for some points. You'll be rooting for UAB to not do anything, which, it's possible. UAB needs to run the ball. Lee Beebe is their most talented offensive player. I mean, Jacob Zeno's a heck of a quarterback, but, it's just not clicked enough in the offensive line department and overall just for things to develop. But with the run game, it's been clicking. And Lee Beebe they just need to feed him the ball. They need to match Army. They need to just run it down their throat and hope they can get into some low scoring battle and try to eke it out. If they can get Army into a rushing battle, Lee Beebe is very talented and he can win them football games. But can the defense hold up is another question for UAB. They've had some serious struggles. They struggled against the run against Tulane. I mean, Maki Hughes was able to do what he wanted. And Army's just going to be able to do what they want if UAB doesn't adjust. So 26 points is a lot. I am obviously thinking Army's going to roll over them, but I can see a world where if UAB is able to institute that ground game, they can cover 26 points. I mean, that's a lot of points. Do I see them losing by 2 touchdowns? Yeah, I do, and I just don't see a path forward for Trent Dilfer in Birmingham. I'm hoping the fans get something better on the field this week, but if not, I'm hoping also for the fans that the powers that be realize that the Trent Dilfer experience may not be working out. You got to give a guy time. But last week at UAB, it just showed that the fan base really isn't approving of what's been going on with their football program on the field. So in terms of the fan output at the stadium. So UAB's got to find a way to run the ball, but it's going to be an uphill battle. I would stay away from that 26-point spread, but if you need to, I would take Army minus 26 over the UAB plus 26 for sure. Moving on to a game that I don't know necessarily, will it happen, will it won't? Memphis versus South Florida, praying for all the people out there over on the West Coast because obviously Hurricane Milton just hit. We've seen some flooding over at the USF campus area. Ray J a little bit further. We saw a lot of rain going into Raymond James Stadium, but game's been moved to Saturday at 3:30. It was supposed to be tonight. That would not have happened for sure. So Saturday at 3:30, though, it's possible it happens, and if it does, USF's going to have to hope Byron Brown is playing football. Suffered a knee ankle injury last week, and if he's out, he's their leading passer, leading rusher. I mean, USF's got some talented running backs, but I don't think they've got enough in the bag to replicate what Byron Brown was bringing to the table as an athlete. I mean, yes, he struggled, wasn't over 60% as a passer, only 2 touchdowns, but he hadn't thrown a pick on the year. A couple fumbles, but I mean, he's got 20 more yards than Kelly Joyner, the starting running back. So the way he impacts the game, the way they run their offense is going to be handicapped if he doesn't play. Bryce Archie has been the backup quarterback. He's been less than desired for USF fans. I mean, it's tough for any backup quarterback to run that type of offense, any offense, but especially an offense where you got to make quick reads, quick decisions, and not on top of that, you got to keep your stamina up, stay hydrated. It's a tough offense to play in, but when it's working in high octane, it's hard to stop. So not a knock on the scheme at all, but it's just tough for a backup quarterback to go in there and run that. So if Byron Brown is out, Memphis by a touchdown, -7. That's my safe. That's my safe AAC pick of the week. I think Memphis wins that game handily. They need to make a statement in AAC play here to try to kind of get that Navy loss off their back a little bit. With everything that's going on in the Mountain West, there could be a loss any night. Boise State has looked good, but uh, we saw UNLV fall off to Syracuse the other night. So anything can happen over there in the Mountain West, and so Memphis has to be ready. So does Tulane. Tulane's been winning though. They lost, fortunately, 2 tough games in out of conference play, but since conference play started, Tulane's been guns blazing, and Memphis just needs to do that this week versus South Florida team, potentially with an injured quarterback, offense that's going to be down and out, and Memphis -7 if the quarterback, Byron Brown, is injured. That's a safe one, folks. That may be a safe one. But USF's had some time to prepare for without Byron Brown, so we'll see if Bryce Archie's found more rhythm in that offense. If not, then Memphis is going to go in there and blow them out. But we're hoping for football. I mean, if there's football being played on Saturday, that means the Tampa area is obviously there's still going to be some damage and people who are affected, and hopefully, the recovery process and everything that goes into that works out. It's always hurricanes suck. I've been a South Florida resident my whole life, and there's just nothing good about them. But you try to look for the positive things, and football being played on Saturday at 3:30, although there may be some people still affected. It shows that the larger area is still ready to host a football game, a big one at that. So hopefully that game gets played, and hopefully Byron Brown plays for USF because they're going to need him. But the final game of the slate this week, UTSA versus Rice, battle of Texas. Both programs needing a victory here in this one. UTSA at 2-3, Rice at 1-4. Owen McCown has struggled here, taking over for the veteran Frank Harris. But Rice has struggled too at 1-4. They haven't had much right going for them this season. They beat Texas Southern 69-7. That was the highlight. But other than that, it's been all L's. They lost to Sam Houston. They lost to Houston. They lost to Army. They lost to Charlotte. They were on bye last week, but now they've got matchup at home, although, Rice, not much of a home field advantage. It's still home nonetheless. And UTSA comes in there needing a win. I mean, they were probably expecting a little bit of growing pains without their quarterback of the last 6 years, feels like a decade. But the way UTSA struggled, the loss to East Carolina was really surprising. I mean, East Carolina has some serious problems going on over there, but they lose 30-20 in that one. And they really weren't able to affect Jake Garcia too much. I mean, he throws the 2 picks, but 17-35, 294, 2 scores. That was by far Jake Garcia's best stat line of the year. So we'll see if he kind of bounces back, or if UTSA kind of bounces back this week against a Rice team who also, as we mentioned, needs to bounce back. -3.5 though on that spread. Owen McCown has had some good games. He's had some games where he hasn't even completed 50% of his passes, but when he's on, he's on. He's a talented quarterback, and I just think the UTSA offense as a whole really has more going for it than Rice does. I mean, E.J. Warner has been up and down. He's thrown 7 touchdowns, but he's also thrown 6 picks on the year, 955 yards. Dean Connors is their best player by far, a running back, one of the best running backs in the AAC, just a bruiser, and he's got speed to his game. I think he's going to be a huge factor whether or not Rice competes in this game. If they can get the run game going with Dean Connors, I just don't see UTSA having the run game to match Rice. But, if Rice can't get the run game going, I think Owen McCown is a much better quarterback than E.J. Warner. I think the passing offense for UTSA is much better overall than what Rice can bring to the table. And I also think the defense for UTSA, although it struggled, will be better in this one. And at only 3.5 point favorites, or now it's up to 4. It's just 3.5. Now it's 4. Keeps changing on us, does this spread. But UTSA comes in 4 point favorites on the road versus Rice. I like that one. That's probably if Memphis doesn't play USF this week, That's probably my safe pick of the week is UTSA -4 over Rice this week. Get UTSA to 3-3 heading into a home matchup with FAU next week, which that game is going to be pivotal for both programs. AAC battle, both squads going to be trying to keep that season on the right ship. If FAU loses this week, that's going to be an even more must win, especially if UTSA loses their season. If they lose to Rice, I don't know if it's salvageable, but especially in Texas standards, I feel like that's like a sin. But we'll see. I like UTSA this week over Rice, and that sets up a pretty good matchup next week against FAU. But folks, that's our slate this week in the AAC football world. AAC men's basketball media days on Monday. We'll be there. We'll have coverage for you on Bleacher Brothers Sports Network, some written articles, some interviews, and we'll wrap it up all for a show next week for you guys, talking everything AAC hoops. Basketball season's right around the corner. AAC basketball is one of my favorite things. It's fun. Got a bunch of competing programs this year. New coaches, new storylines, new things to watch for, new athletes. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun seeing what's up with the AAC in the men's basketball world from Dallas, Texas on Monday. But folks, no AAC Thursday football tonight. All of your games this week on Sunday, starting with Army and UAB at noon. Then you got Memphis and South Florida at 3:30, and UTSA and Rice along with North Texas and FAU at 7 p.m. Folks, if you missed my calls of the week, UTSA -4 over Rice, and Memphis by a touchdown over South Florida. If you're a betting person, like to bet, go check out Rebet. It's legal here in Florida. Check out the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network for some links on that. And go take yourself Memphis -7 and UTSA -4. But don't be surprised if that Memphis one pushes. I could see that game getting moved. But hopefully everyone on the West Coast made it out okay with Milton. And hopefully the recovery process goes as smooth as possible. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's edition of Inside the American. We'll be back next week. We'll be back later today if you're an FAU fan, talking FAU, North Texas, more in depth on Inside the Borough. And next Tuesday, we'll be back on the Listelli Report talking everything Florida college football, along with FAU versus North Texas. And stay tuned for our AAC Media Day coverage on Monday. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Robbie Listelli for the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. We'll catch you next time.